Hola, you are listening to First Gen Healing, a podcast on Latinx healing and awakening journeys. This is a part 2 with our guest, Alex. Hi, Alex.
Hello.
In this part, we're going to be talking about boundary setting, evolution of self, and prioritizing joy. And this is a continuation of part 1. So if you guys missed that, make sure that you go listen to that. It's going to give you a lot of insight into these topics. And now we get to dive even deeper into them.
Which one should we start with?
I'll let you choose.
Well, let's do boundary setting. I feel like boundary setting is a good one. A big part of really feeling joy or happiness is really about like setting a lot of boundaries. And I think as someone who's a former people pleaser, I know that, it's really, really hard or can be. I think for me, one of the things about boundary setting, or at least that helped me start boundary setting, was when I would feel like angry or like frustrated. Like when I would feel like those two emotions, that usually meant that a boundary was crossed that maybe I didn't know about or that I haven't set yet, right? Because before I would always be like, oh, Alex, you're being sensitive.
Or like everyone else seems to deal with these things and they're not saying anything. Or you can even get that from other people, right? Like, oh, well, your brother doesn't complain, your cousin doesn't complain. But before we even continue with that, can we establish maybe what is a boundary as you would like explain it? We're not scientific here. We're more about vibes.
It's a way for you to communicate what you allow and don't allow. So it's like, these are things that I do not allow to happen to me or in my life. So this is something that I'm setting in place so that way that does not happen. That's how I think about like as like a boundary.
Okay. I feel like there is internal and external boundaries. So you can have boundaries with yourself. Like, I will not put myself in these situations, or I will no longer engage in these behaviors or conversations, etc. And then there's the outward ones when you're communicating to someone else, your boundary. So you said that you started to understand that you need to set boundaries, or a boundary might have been broken when you started to feel frustration and or anger, which is so interesting because I think those are the two emotions that I don't let myself feel a lot.
Same. No,
Talking about
honestly,
that inner
same.
work.
No, same. Like, it was really hard for me to access those emotions. Yeah, because I don't know why. I think I felt more frustrated than angry, I would say, a lot of the times. And it was because I had like no boundaries set. So it was really like, I was just out here, like, people were doing whatever they wanted, and I was just kind of bouncing, through these things and not telling people no, or I don't allow this, or things like that. So
Yeah. Can we talk about why it's so hard to set a boundary? We talked about in part 1 about connecting with your body and understanding your body. At a body level, I think a lot of us experience this fear, like that gut punch that you said, when we think we want to say no, but we feel like we can't. There's something that stops us internally.
for so long, we've put other people's feelings and emotions over our own. So I think in those moments sometimes we're like, oh, well, we're like prioritizing them versus ourselves, right? Because it's like, oh, but then they're not going to like that. Or like, oh no, well, then they're going to get mad. Or like, then they're going to feel sad. And that's why we don't move forward with it. I also think like, maybe we just have never seen someone set a healthy boundary in our lives, right? So we don't know what that's like. Like, we know taking care of people. We know how to like be there regardless of anything that's happening, but we don't know how to tell people no and it not really affect the relationship. You know what I mean?
We have that unconditionalness on lock because it feels good. Usually when you're helping someone, they're not fighting with you. And so you fear that if you set a boundary that you won't be that for them anymore, that then that would happen. Like, oh, maybe a fight would happen, maybe an argument would happen, and I don't want that. When we're highly empathetic, you literally can see their facial expressions, you can feel their mood change. And so if growing up we had to deal with a lot of that in our families, like a lot of other people's emotions, maybe a lot of people did express theirs and we learned to not express ours. As adults, then we're, that inner child is still within us. And that inner child fears, like, I don't want this person to be angry. I don't want their mood to change. I'd rather it be so easier like this. I'd rather give than say no and then fear, what could happen.
I definitely agree with that. And I think that there is a lot of fear of also maybe like really drastic consequences happening, right? Where it's like, well, maybe if I like tell them no, then, they'll stop talking to me. I think that's a really like big fear, especially if you built like connections with people by you basically like providing to them all the time, right? If you're like, if I'm no longer providing to you, then you're not gonna want to be like, my whatever friend, whatever sibling, things like that. So I think it's also maybe a little bit of that where it's like, you don't want people to like abandon you, because you're no longer pleasing like their needs basically.
Yeah. And what's so interesting is now that I have worked with clients, I have met the other side of the coin. So let's say we don't know how to relate with others unless it's through giving, or at some point that was us. There are people who don't know how to relate to others in ways that aren't asking for help. So if we're the givers, the doers, I'll be there for yours. What I met through her is there's personalities that are like, I don't want to stand in my power too strong, because how I know how to relate with people is asking for help, asking for advice, doing the things.
Interesting. Huh. I never thought about that.
That's why authenticity and like coming into your own and setting the boundaries that you need sets you free, but it sets others free too, because in like separating that way and like her, for example, coming into her power, it really establishes such a different relationship as opposed to like this bond that is causing harm on both ends and disempowering both.
Yes. It's almost this like codependency in the relationship where it's like, well, I only really connect because you help me with certain things, right? And if we disconnect from that codependency, like, are we still connected? Like what, like what is our, like what are we, kind of a thing, and it's tough.
And the thing I think too is that maybe when you're going through this, you're not necessarily thinking of it in this way. There's just like this fear of setting a boundary. Like, I don't want to do this anymore, but I don't want to tell them. I don't think I can tell them. Or we protect ourselves by saying, I already know what they're going to say. Like, we're already avoiding it by thinking like we know the end result, right? Yeah. But have you noticed that when sometimes you set those boundaries, things don't happen the way you thought they would?
Yes. I always thought something catastrophic was going to happen. They were never going to talk to me, or they were going to yell at me, or like, I was going to feel really like crappy or things like that. And for some people, when I would set the boundary, they actually were almost kind of like grateful. Like they were like, oh, like I didn't know you felt that way. Almost like apologizing. Now that I do know, like I'm gonna obviously like shift the way like I engage with you. And that's been really nice. And that's when you know that those are good people to have, if they're like responsive and they're like, oh, and they care about how you're feeling. Even if like in their head it doesn't make sense. Like maybe to them it's like, I don't understand why you would feel that way, but it's kind of like I'm accepting that you're telling me that that's how you're feeling. Right. That's how you know that that's a good, I think, connection to have with someone. Yeah. And most of the time, honestly, when I've set a boundary, in the beginning, it might feel a little like, ugh. But after that, I think it gets better. Because even though that interaction might not be great, you're not feeling great already. Like, you're in a place where you don't feel good. Like, people keep doing these things that are harming you.
And in some way, too, what's interesting is, let's say those people that were receptive to it, because you weren't speaking up because of that fear, you're building your resentment bucket towards them. So maybe for a very long time, you were the helpful person. You didn't even realize that was causing harm to you. Now you come into the awareness, oh, this is burning me out. Oh, I don't want to relate in this way anymore. But I'm scared of speaking up. So every time that person like expects you to act that way and you act that way, you're like resenting them maybe, or like there's this like, thing here that's this friction that's already building. And yet like you said, like if you were to express it and it's well received, you were building this for nothing.
Exactly.
It didn't have to exist. Yeah. And that person wasn't even aware that that was happening.
And I think that would happen to me a lot, where I would feel really resentful. Because in my head, the way that I thought about it back then was like, how could they not know? I would never do this to them. So like, how could they not know that this is impacting me?
Yeah.
And it may not be something malicious, right, that they're doing to you. And there are times where it is, right? So let's also say that. But, you know, like, I would say, like, there are times when maybe it is just, like, something that you just need to express.
Yeah. So let's say this is best case scenario. You express your needs, it's well received, person changes their behaviors. There is another potentiality, yes, where maybe person gets upset, there's a little interaction or emotional. There's an emotion that's like, como destapada, you know, once you express your boundary, maybe they get defensive. Oh, but you this and how, that kind.
Yeah.
Or upset or walks away. So yes, there are people will have their own reaction to that.
Right.
But in those instances, personally, I think what's really important is like having that self-love or that awareness in the time in the interaction where you take a couple deep breaths. I'm okay. They're just expressing their part of it. They're reacting, you know, but I'm saying what I need. And like you said, I think sometimes it's like that explosion. Okay, it was like a burst of something, and then it dies down. Yeah.
Exactly. And if it happens a lot, like if you feel like you're around people who have a lot of those kind of reactions, you know, maybe it's time that you start thinking about the people that you're like really close to, right? Because for me, it's like, if you were like someone who really cared about the other person, you may have an explosive, you know, reaction or things like that. But at the end of the day, like, you care for them, right? So you, I think, would at least listen to them. If you feel like you're in a place where, like, you know, someone wouldn't listen to you, care about how you're feeling, like those types of things. For me, the way that I thought about it was like, I need to create a standard of who my friends are, people that I interact with like a lot. And if you're just at a place where you're not able to do that, then maybe it just means that we're not connected like at this point in time, right? Or like maybe I just create space. Because I found that once you create space, then other people who are aligned with you and are able to give you that, like, now you have space to actually like have those people in your life.
For me personally, a lot of the boundary setting happened with family, and I think something worth talking about is like when someone continues to break that boundary, or what can happen is put that boundary in your face. I think that's what I feared the most. Like, oh, once I say that, they're going to be like, oh, but you said I couldn't do this, so now I don't do it. And thankfully that didn't happen to me often.
I think that's a valid fear, right? Because even in like Latino culture, it's like, oh, que ridiculo, like whatever. Like now you think you're like whoever and blah, 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 yada, yada, yada. I think that could be really tough to navigate for sure.
Kind of going back to part one, where it's like setting your own standards of who you are, what you want, what you accept, so that if that person or your boundaries not well received, like you can be an observer too, you know. What is it, like observe, don't absorb, something like that. That really helped me.
Oh, yeah. Sometimes you may not even know what the boundary is. And I think it's like, let yourself be in that gray space sometimes, because sometimes it's like, when I'm with this person, I just don't feel good. Like, you know what I mean? And I don't know what the answer to that is, you know, like, I don't know. So maybe sometimes you don't need to like fully have something set and like be able to like tell them. Maybe it just means like, you know, maybe I'll just take some space a little bit, you know, or like, you know, things like that, just to kind of see. So, and then that's when I think you can really figure out like what is the boundary, and, you know, and like that way you can then communicate it and don't feel like, oh, I can't do anything until I know like what the boundary is, you know?
Yeah, I love that.
And I think you not liking something is enough of a reason. Like, you don't need more of a reason than that. Like, you can just tell someone like, I just don't like when you do that. And that's it. I think for me, sometimes what would stop me is like, I felt like I needed a better reason. Like, I couldn't just be like, oh, I just don't like that when you do that. Like, I needed like a more valid reason, right? To like tell them something.
Yeah.
And then I had to like really like, you know, unpack that. Like, why do I feel like me just not liking something is enough, right? And learning that, you just not liking something is enough of a reason for you to tell someone that, for them to stop doing that.
Yeah. I love that. Ooh, I feel like that's a good little segment on boundaries. That should
Yes.
give you guys some best practices for the first gen community, because I think that, yeah, a lot of things, a lot of information out there can sometimes feel disconnected from like our reality. Oh, but they don't have the family that we do. Oh, but they're not first gen. And we can also use that as a way of not setting anything, of continuing and then leading ourselves into an uncomfortable place. So I like that. Let's move on to evolution of self, which I think likely combines with prioritizing joy.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about what that means for you, and how does joy come in? Like, what is it that made like joy stand out for you?
We were talking about this a little bit in part one, where it's like sometimes when we are no longer wanting to be this thing, then who are we? If I'm no longer this like good worker or, whatever X thing, then like who am I? And it's that fear of like, if I no longer have these like pillars that make me, then what am I? Then I'm gonna be in this like lost space. Being comfortable that like people change, you can change, right? Like things happen, life experiences happen. And it doesn't mean that it's like a bad thing, that you're no longer that. And I think for me, like I was scared of that because, for me, a lot of like my value or my worth sometimes were like in those things. I'm always, helping people. I'm always like this friend, I never,
Reliable,
yeah,
responsible.
exactly, reliable, responsible. I'm never too emotional, things like that. Like I just, I'm very like, I'm the sturdy thing.
Easygoing.
Yeah, like I'm the friend that if something's happening, you can go to Alex. Alex, regardless if he's crying and like doing something, like he's gonna help you. You know,
Unconditional.
yeah, the unconditional. Yeah, exactly. So what I learned is like, in order to really feel like fulfilled or like happy, is like you need to let yourself shift. Like you have to let yourself like change, grow, try different things, because like things happen, and like you're not that same person that you were like 6 months ago, and maybe back then like you had never thought about meditating, and then now it's like something that you want to do. You know what I mean? Like it's like these
Yeah.
things that maybe just weren't you before that now are aligning with who you are. And
Yeah.
the funny thing is like sometimes like that may be who we always were, we just had all this other stuff happening, right? So it's like we were never in environments that let us be who we authentically are.
I like to say like who you really are is hiding under who you think you need to be.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And I just saw this quote that was talking about like, tension is who you think you like want to be or who you think you should be, and then relaxation is who you are. Like if you are in like who you are authentically, it's gonna flow. Like it's not gonna feel this like tension of like, oh, like I need to keep like trying to be this thing. It's like it's gonna be just who you are as a person, so it's gonna flow. And I think for me, because I never let myself be who I wasn't able to feel joy or happiness or fulfillment, because I wasn't doing things that I liked. I didn't know what I liked. So for me, it was a lot of reflection, a lot of, meditation. We talked about like inner child, like healing, and then there's that, I think it's like inner teenager healing. I think there's also like a thing. So for me, starting with like inner child stuff was actually helpful, because when you think about yourself as a child, most people, there's not all this like influence that's happening, right? It's like you're kind of like more like authentically who you are. So start from there. Like, what were things that you like to do? And then don't shame yourself for maybe doing those things now, because it's like maybe when you were younger, you really liked The Lion King or something, right? And it's like, well, let's watch The Lion King. You know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah.
maybe let's connect with that, even though you're older now, like those types of things.
Yeah.
I think that's a good place to like start on your journey.
It helps you reconnect with the way you perceived life from a younger age, with this curiosity, with like
Yes.
less fear. I loved what you said, like tension versus relaxation, and like who you think you need to be versus who you are. And how I see it too is like putting on a mask, you know, like if you're constantly putting on a mask, like this is the real you and then this is who you think you need to be, or like who you show
Yeah.
up as. I'm always there for people, I'm the hard worker, etc. Then you're never really being seen for who you really are because there's always a mask in between. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think that can like foster that imposter syndrome or not feeling truly loved because
Right.
you know that like this vulnerable tender part of you isn't the one showing up to these places.
Yep.
So it's so interesting because as much as we can crave that deeper connection and that like recognition or being seen, we are sometimes preventing that by how we
Yep.
show up in everywhere.
Exactly. Maybe now you have all these connections, but the foundation, it's not who you are. You maybe you have like all these friends and all these people that you hang out with, but they're built on this mask. They're built on
Mm-hmm.
something that's not who you authentically are. So yeah, undoubtedly like you're not going to feel fulfilled because that's not who you actually are. You're just portraying this, right?
Yeah.
And I also don't want to like shame, people putting on masks. Like there's a lot of reasons why people do that, right? Like it's,
Yeah.
like there's like survival, you know what I mean? Maybe you weren't in circumstances where you were able to do that. So I also don't want to like make people feel
No.
guilty for having those things. But I think that um, sometimes what I've seen, at least for myself, is that I was carrying these masks that were maybe useful at one point in my life, but are no longer needed, you know?
Yeah.
So maybe when I was this age, to survive, I had to do that. So that makes sense, right? Because I had to do
Yeah.
that. But now I'm here at this part of my life and I no longer need to uphold that mask. So it's really like recognizing that and recognizing that, at one point you may have, but you may not need it anymore.
So good. Yeah, you're right. I mean, no shame to
Yeah.
whatever masks need to stay on,
Yeah.
of course. It's more so like when you're ready, when you feel like you can know that on the other side of that, there can be deeper connection, things that align with you
Yes.
more, deeper self exploration. So if you feel like you don't really know yourself, if you feel like you
Exactly.
don't really know what you like, sometimes it's because we uphold that version of ourselves for so long that we don't know how to take it off, you know, and it feels weird taking it off.
Exactly.
But just as I was telling my client, like, okay, let's, back to the mask. So this is the mask and this is the real you,
Yeah.
right? So because there's a mask, there's something that protects the real you in a sense.
Right.
And when you take off the mask, yes, things can hurt. Rejection can hurt a little deeper because now I'm me and now you didn't want me for me.
Yep.
Now you're mad because I'm being me and you're mad at me, like the real me, not the masked me, the
Yeah.
real me. So yes, things can hurt deeper because this is your vulnerable, beautiful side of you, but also things can like reach you deeper in terms of the positive too, like
Hmm.
excitement, like joy, like
Yeah.
happiness, love. When you experience that through the real you, it can be so powerful. And it's part of, for example, the journey that I've taken on, like in terms of like podcasting and like first gen healing, etc. This is the real me,
Yep.
HR professional Priscilla, that I can do that, yes, I
Yeah.
can put on this and be professional and like whatever, talk laws and stuff, but that wasn't the real me. And like it was a mask that I thought I had to put on to survive in this world, to have money, to make, pay my bills, etc. And it has felt so good, like taking it off and then connecting with people, like-minded people, because when
Yes.
I shine as myself, others are like, oh, I see myself in that person, or there's something about that person. And that only happens when it's like, when you're showing up authentically, essentially.
Exactly. Exactly. And then there's less work involved because you're not trying to like uphold something. It's like it's just who you are. Like that's just who you naturally are. So it's no longer like, oh well, now I have to think about how am I going to be this thing, and you know what I mean, with my interactions and things like that. It's like, oh, like you can just flow naturally because now you're just being who you actually are.
And it's exhausting to uphold that. So part of that exhaustion, that burnout, that tiredness can
Yep.
come from that. It doesn't even have to come from your actual job. It can come from the
Yes.
way that you think you need to show up to keep it.
And I think with time, like, you know, I don't know how to, I'm trying to think of like how to build that, like, kind of like distance between like what you think of yourself and what others think of you. Because I feel like,
Mm.
at least for me, like after a while, like because I was so strong in who I was, it didn't really impact me as much if someone like had a different opinion of me.
Yeah.
Because it was like, I know who I am. I don't need that person to validate who I am. And
Yeah.
also, people have a lot of their own things going on, right? Like, it's
Mm-hmm.
most of the time, I promise you, it's not even about you. Like, it's about them,
Mm-hmm.
right? And being who you are is somehow like triggering something in them that they're, like projecting onto you, right?
Yeah.
But it's not about who you actually are as a person. So I think being like truly happy, you really have to have a strong foundation of who you are as a person. And I mean, that can take, time, but I would say like give yourself that time to do that.
Yeah. And there's space for you. There's space for you in this world exactly as you are. I promise you.
Exactly.
If there is room in this world for your loud ass tia, your drunk ass tío, you know what I mean? Inappropriate ass grandpa or grand whatever. Like
Yeah,
if there is room in this world for all these personalities, there is room for you. My dear,
exactly.
my love, my first gen. Like, yes, you can be yourself. You can be
Exactly.
authentic, and it's part of it is working on ourselves, and making that space for ourselves, but I promise you there is space for you.
I mean, like we mentioned, I mean, sometimes, thinking about like, choose your own joy or your happiness, like you have to be at a point where like you know what those things are, right? That exploration
Mm,
part. And it's like for me personally, like I was at a point where like I had no idea. Like I had no idea what made me happy. Like I really
mm-hmm.
asked myself that question and I was like, Alex, like what do you like to do just because you like to do it? Not because of like, oh, this makes me look this way or this person likes that or like this is the goal or whatever. It was like, what do you actually just like to do? And I didn't know. Like I had no idea. Like I was just like I thought that hobbies were like a thing that like people who had money like had.
Yeah.
Like I'm like, I don't
That's
know.
for rich people.
Yeah. I was like,
Yeah.
I don't know what hobbies are, which I mean also can speak to like maybe because, if you do come from like a lower income, family, I get it. Like, maybe there wasn't like room for you to have that, right?
Yeah.
Which is what happened to me, right? Like I think for me it was like priority was usually like, other things, so we didn't have the space to do that, which is
Yeah.
totally real. But I think now I'm in a place where like I am able to do that and I'm able to really find out like what makes me happy. And that's why I think like prioritizing joy and happiness is such a big thing for me because I'm like, I understand what it was like to not, and I understand
Mm,
what it was like to be at that rock bottom where you think you're like, you're doing everything right, you're a good person, you're helping other people, and you're like, but I don't feel happy, like I don't feel fulfilled. And now I'm at a place where like I am really feeling fulfilled and it's like that journey can be like intense, right? But I promise you, you all can do it. I promise. I promise.
yeah. It's because the life that you build out of I have to's, I must, like I think like now I'm like, of course it led me to burnout. Of course, like
Right.
everything I did was because I thought I had to, because it was not because I get to, I want to, I love
Yeah.
to. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Yeah. And switching that,
Exactly.
and yes, you're right. Like if you're still in that survival mode, that, and not only like in the mode, but like you actually, you really need, you're in debt or
Yeah.
you really need that income. Yes, these are things that are maybe harder to like focus on. I still think
Right.
there's things you can do. Like I don't think that it's something that you have to wait for until you're like financially secure. But I do think like it changes a bit. Like yes, for example, if you want to connect with your inner child and you have disposable income, and so then you get to go buy the toys or like buy
Yeah.
new hobbies,
Yeah.
yeah, of course it's a different experience than like if you don't even have enough for your bills. But I do think that there are things that within each like level you can do to still unearth like the true you and start setting yourself free a little bit more.
Exactly. Yeah, because yeah, now that I think about it, I'm like, well, yeah, of course I didn't feel fulfilled. Like you mentioned, like I wasn't doing anything that I actually like. So it's like, I don't know why it was like surprising to me, right?
Yeah.
But I
To me
do think,
too.
yeah, it was just like, wait, what? But
Yeah.
I think because a lot of us, maybe we do believe like this is the formula. You work hard, you help others, you're gonna be happy, you're gonna be
Hmm.
fulfilled. And it's just like that can't be like your whole life though, right? It can be like if you're working a job that looks good on paper but you hate it, then like it's not gonna work. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah, exactly. Oh, what a beautiful journey we have been on in these two
yes.
episodes. I think that definitely resonates, throughout, and I hope other people resonate as well. I know that a lot of people are running up against maybe that, like, deception of like, wait, I was supposed to be happy by now. Like, wait, I was
Mm-hmm.
supposed to. So hopefully, like, coming along this journey with us helps you maybe see glimpses of what you can be doing or changing, or some of the things that maybe like can lead you down a more fulfilling, happy, joyful life.
Yes.
So thank you so much, Alex, for being a part of the podcast and for sharing your story. Is there any last words that you'd like to share? I'd also like you to share where people can find you and
Yes.
follow your journey of prioritizing joy.
Well, first of all, thank you, Priscilla, for having me. I think this has been a really amazing opportunity. So thank you so much. This is my first podcast, hopefully first of many, right? But whoop whoop.
Yeah.
Um, I would say that, yeah, I mean, if you resonated with anything that we talked about, like healing journey or like prioritizing yourself, please follow me at It's the Alex Rome on Instagram and TikTok. So go ahead and follow me there. I post a lot about like my own journey, and really my goal is to talk about my own journey, but then also help others, prioritize their own joy and their own happiness. So if you're really wanting to build community around that, or if you want like more tips, or just, you just want to know how I was able to do that, yeah, for sure, follow me.
All right, Alex. And just some last final questions. These are super random.
Okay,
Are you ready?
I'm ready.
These are staples. There's First Gen Healing staples. Okay. Pozole o tamales?
Tamales, for sure.
Champurrado or hot chocolate?
Ooh, I don't really like champurrado. I'm gonna say hot chocolate. Sorry, y'all, but hot
Yee!
chocolate.
No, I'm just kidding. Salsa verde o roja?
I'm gonna say verde, actually. Salsa verde. Yeah.
Okay, okay. Concha de vainilla o chocolate?
Ooh, I'm gonna go with vanilla.
And then Bad Bunny or Daddy Yankee?
That's a hard one. Cause Daddy Yankee's like the OG. Like,
Mm-hmm.
dang. I'm gonna go with Daddy Yankee. I'm gonna go with Daddy Yankee.
Daddy Yankee?
He helped build the whole thing. I mean, how can we not go with Daddy Yankee?
Yeah, that Gasolina song started it all.
Exactly.
Okay, we're pulling up to your favorite taco place.
Uh-huh.
What is your taco order?
Ooh. I think I'm gonna go with tacos de carne asada. Yeah, I'll go with
Tacos
that.
de carne
A
asada.
classic.
Okay, ¿cuántos? How many?
Cuatro. I think cuatro is a good one.
Okay, salsa verde and con todo o la pura carne?
Ooh, con todo en salsa
Con
verde. Yeah.
todo. Ooh, okay. All right. Well, if you guys want to buy him tacos, you already know. They better be good tacos because he's from a border town. So I'm
I
assuming there's good
know.
tacos out there.
Come on. The standard is high, so please.
The standard is high. Thank you so much, Alex, for being here, for your time. And thank you guys for listening. If you enjoyed the episode, make sure that you like it, that you subscribe, and that you go follow Alex on his journey. Bye.
Bye.